I've talked about this model a lot, but I finally got one to document. Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Today we're reviewing a custom shop Gibson Explorer. But as I'm unboxing this, let's learn a little bit about Explorer history. So 1958, that's the first year that Gibson came out with the Explorer. You also had the Flying V introduced at the same time, and they were made in very limited numbers because they were just a little bit too futuristic. If you want all the nitty-gritty details about those things, check out the Ultra Collector's Edition Brazilian Rosewood Fretboard reissue episode. But outside of the original 50s ones and a few leftover parts 60s ones, we didn't see the Explorer get reintroduced until 1976. Now those guys were made out of mahogany, and they changed up some of the other specs. We now had super humbucking pickups in them. We no longer get the cool Kluson tuners. And perhaps the most famous user of one of those is the Edge of U2. But ever since that point, some type of an Explorer has been in production. The 80s saw the Heritage Series ones in limited numbers, which brought the Korina back. Also around that time, you get the thrash metal Explorers that primarily dominated the 80s. And then in the very late 80s into the 90s, that's when you just see the 76 style start to come back, but you get like cherry finishes. And then in the early 2000s, we have the introduction of the Faded series. And then later on, we get cool artist signatures like the Thunderhorse Explorer, the Lizzie Hale models, or the Sammy Hagar Red Rocker. And hey, don't forget about those weird Explorer Pros that we talked about in this episode too. Now that's just a broad scope of all the models that are out there. Like we could also talk about the Explorer Customs. But today we're talking about an interesting custom shop model that blends 58 and 76 style specs together. So let's go ahead and see what I pulled out of the Gibson demo shop because we needed to document it. It is a beautiful walnut colored Gibson Explorer. Now, is this actually made of walnut and a really cool 58 style spec walnut Explorer? Unfortunately, no. It's just the color. It's just a regular mahogany Explorer, so it's not like a brother to the Paul or the SG. But for many a years, Gibson could not source Korina that was good enough, and or they just didn't want to. But it was around 2021 when they brought back the Korina for these Explorers, and they started to charge $10,000 for these, outside of the collector's limited edition runs that were even more. And it was at that time when they kind of soft discontinued these mahogany ones because these were only $5,000, which in comparison to the 10K Korina ones today makes these seem really affordable. But don't get me wrong, $5,000 is still expensive for a custom shop Explorer. So I guess you could call this the poor man's expensive Explorer or the poor man's Korina, but you can tell it's got the 58 specs as far as the body goes. You've got your nice gold hardware. It's got the ABR1 bridge, so it is historically spec'd. You got the nice plastics on here, but most importantly for me, you've got the awesome Kluson tuners. I always love this vibe. It just completely transforms the way these things look. It's a little bit doofy and goofy and out there, but that's what I love about the 58 specs. Now, I was expecting a huge, giant baseball bat neck on this thing, and I'm not gonna lie, this is actually a little bit thinner than I was expecting. However, I wouldn't necessarily call it a 60 slim taper. It definitely has a good roundedness to it, so we'll get all those dimensions on the workbench. But so far, this feels about the way I would expect it to be. However, I was looking along the end grain just to see how many pieces this body is. It appears to be one piece. That's insane. This was a big old slab of mahogany that they chopped up. And it's got lots of interesting wood grain. Kind of an interesting pattern here, a lot of waviness around the rest of it. So it kind of gives you a little bit of the best of both worlds if you don't necessarily have to have a Korina-bodied Explorer. But to learn more about this one, let's go ahead and throw it on the workbench to take an individual look at its parts and specs. Alright, I actually found something pretty cool in this Explorer. So if we take our neck pickup out, you're going to see something a little bit odd in our cavity. Nope, it's not our long neck tenon that gets chopped up right there and the end is covered over by our pickguard. It's right over here. We have a little small block of maple wood. And then when we move on over to our bridge, we see the exact same thing over here. So at first I was thinking, hey, that's kind of cool. They cap off this little route right here. That way they don't have to worry about wires going awry when they're trying to install the pick guard, because that makes them not sit flush. Because I have seen this done before, but then this one made it really obvious why it's actually there. There's nothing for the pickup ring to screw into. And since both of them need mounted right there, that's the true reason why they cap those off. Here's the rest of our toggle switch cavity route. And here you can see the toggle switch on the back. Nothing too crazy, but that is a 4-ply pick guard you're seeing on this one, with the black as the outermost layer and a white one on the back. And our pickups do have gold covers, but it's got the VOS treatment over top of it. I mean, the whole guitar has that. Basically, they just throw a little bit of gunk on your guitar and it gets rid of the super shininess. It kind of makes it look like it's a little bit older, but without actually adding finish checking and all that other stuff. As far as our pickups, we get the custom Bucker 3s. These are unpotted pickups that read 7.62 k ohms in the bridge, 7.99 in the neck, and the middle for fun at 3.9. We do have a historically mounted ABR1 bridge with the post directly in the body. The gold on our bridge is definitely a little bit worn, but it has the expected markings down here. The tailpiece has a similar thing going on with the worn gold and is lightweight aluminum. Throwing this thing on the workbench started to make me think, why don't we have like all maple Explorers, especially after seeing those plugs? And then I realized we kind of do. The E2 CMTs were all maple, but then there's also actual walnut Explorers. That was part of the E2 series, but they had sandwich layers of maple in between them, and they also had it the opposite. So it starts Korina, goes into mahogany, then the E2s turn it into either maple walnut or walnut maple, and then we get the introduction of the alder-bodied ones, and then we kind of go back to mahogany for some time. But then in the 2000s, you'd start to mess around with Swamp Ash, with like the Voodoo series, as well as the Explorers. It's kind of cool how many different woods Explorers have been made out of over all these years. As far as our controls, we have a volume for the neck and the bridge, as well as a master tone, with our output jack located on the side. But moving on from our mahogany body, we've got the mahogany neck with the rosewood fretboard. We have our acrylic dot inlays, as is vintage era correct for this particular year reissue. And we have 22 medium jumbo style frets with your typical 24 3/4 inch scale length. Then I measure a 13-degree headstock pitch with a neck angle of 4 degrees. Our nut width is 1.7 inches. That increases to 2.07 by the 12th. But our first fret neck depth is 0.91. That increases to 1.02 by the 12th. So here you can see the comparisons to the Korina Collector's reissue, as well as by the Epiphone Korina one if you were trying to weigh your options. Here's that neck profile at the 1st fret and the 12th fret. It just really gets wide but maintains that C neck shape. As far as our headstock goes, truss rod's your regular style, and the cover is the reissue beveled edge one. Love these things. Then we have our Gibson mother of pearl logo up here that's been slightly tinted with the lacquer, and our Clusen tuners. Moving on to the backside, let's take a look at our control cavity. You've got some nice neat soldering onto your pots, and we've got a bumblebee capacitor, historic style. Now if you're curious why this was a demo shop model, it has nothing to do with any of the micro blemishes. It has everything to do with this. There is a small little chip that they didn't notice until the very end. But our strap buttons for 58 style Explorers are always weird. I don't like them because they're a little bit off center as compared to most Explorers. And then you've got another one right here. The only reason why I say I don't like it is because I normally handled the guitars by the strap buttons and I'm always grabbing right here. My last Epiphone Korina did not balance well, so I'll be interested to see how this Gibson mahogany version does. You can tell the mahogany that they use for the neck is a little bit lighter in color than the body. That's okay, wooden species do vary, example to example, and you can see where they spliced on a new piece of wood right here to put on this part of the headstock, and then they have another wing going on right up here. So your headstock is technically 3 pieces. 1, 2, and then the part that joins onto those in that point shape. There we can see our single line, single ring Clusen style tuners. Then I thought this was kind of funny. So our normal serial number is 82593. So the way we read this one is 8 is a 1958 reissue, 2 for 2022, and then a production number. But then over here, our demo shop stamp did not quite get stamped enough, so it just says emo. But if you get it in the light just right, you can see the D is kinda there. But then I went further and saw there's another demo stamp. So now it's kind of a cool anomaly feature. Double the price! Nah, I'm just kidding. It'll actually be a pretty competitive price. You can find it on my website, troglysguitarshow.com. But all said and done, the weight's not too bad for such a big guitar, 7 pounds, 15 ounces, so just a hair under 8. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how this one sounds. Alright, I've gotta say, love the bridge pickup, love the middle position. The neck is way too muddy on this guitar. It almost sounds like the tones rolled off, but it's not. However, it does give it a great kind of jazzy feel to it. Versus the middle. Now let's try some dirt. Now that we know all about Gibson's custom shop Mahogany Explorer, what are my final thoughts on this thing? I think it's a true sleeper model. These were a great deal in comparison to what we have offered to us today. I can see why they soft discontinued these in favor of the Korina ones, because those ones are just, you know, a little bit more spec correct. They have the wood available to them to do it, so you might as well. I could see these things coming back in the future, however, I bet they would become more expensive at that point in time. On the used market, if you can get one around $4,000 plus or minus $500, I think you're going to be very happy with this. Now this particular one, the neck pickup didn't do much for me on the cleans, but it did start to come to life with a little bit of distortion. It's got some really sweet lead tones, so maybe not the neck pickup for everybody, but at the same time you could also mess with the height of the pickup. Maybe that would change the tones a little bit, but that bridge pickup is just fantastic on this one. Pretty much the only thing I don't like about these 58 style Explorers are the strap button locations. It's this one on the horn that bugs me because it's at such an angle when your strap is on it, it kind of wants to fall off. So if you are going to gig one of these, I would highly suggest strap locks for that reason. But thankfully, this one did balance for the most part. Falls a little bit, but I still don't have to completely support the neck. Overall, yeah, I would highly suggest one of these if you can find one. They seem like a pretty good value overall if you're in the market for a custom shop Gibson. But alright, Troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, consider subscribing. I post videos like this every day. And you might even enjoy this next one.